So here we are at step 3 on making the chopping block. This is the planing. Now, technically you don't really have to do this, depending on what you're going to be using the chopping block for. Sometimes that really rough surface is just fine, because it's not a disposable tool, but they do wear out eventually, and you'll get troughs in them and have to resurface them, and you know, it depends on what you're doing. But I'm making this one for finer carving. My old chopping block starting to get a big divot in it, and it's made out of some hickory was almost a little too far gone to be very useful for a chopping block. I need something nice and flat for my stock knife carving, and something a little nicer. So I want a really nice flat surface on this. So what we're gonna do, as I have discussed in previous videos, is start off with a scrub plane. This is a Stanley number 40 scrub plane, iron soled scrub plane. And the scrub plane is a sort of German style of tool that is, as the name would suggest, used for scrubbing roughness out of a riven piece of wood. And it has a very heavily cambered edge here, and it cuts very aggressively. You can see I've already started work on it a little bit to get the depth set how I want. And I've got it set really pretty aggressively because I've got a big piece that's hopefully not going to wobble around on me too bad. And I want to go ahead and hog as much wood off as fast as I can with this. That's what this thing is for. I may set it, once I get it a little flatter, I may back off the iron a little bit so it's not cutting quite as aggressively. But for the meantime, we're going to try to take really powerful, aggressive strokes across the grain. And that's how it's used, either slightly diagonal to the grain or perfectly parallel to the grain. So yeah, it's set nice and aggressive. Yeah, it's taking off nice amount of material. And I've just got this set up on my room workbench where I've just got a line of pegs here, and it would be kind of hard to wedge this in place. I suppose I could try. I don't think my peg grid is big enough, but I've just got a little wedge jammed up under here to kind of keep it a little more stable. But as you can see, it's stable enough. And if you're doing this and you don't happen to have all this set up already, you could do finer work with the axe if you're inclined to do so, or just figure out some other way to brace it. Really, it's not terribly hard to figure out. So all we're doing is taking the high points off, taking the roughness out as best we can. And I can already see, I'm not sure, yeah, that edge has got a little bit of a teariness, and it's swept down a little bit. I may end up trimming that down just a little bit more. This is a little bit smaller of a chopping block, so I don't need quite as much weight and size to it because I'm mostly going to use this for spoon carving. But they're on the diagonal. This ash is really pleasant to work with. If this was hickory, this would not be nearly as pleasant. Hickory makes great chopping blocks, but these little things can poke into your hand. Sometimes the ends can be a little bit more finicky, and I can use my knees here to brace up against the piece, helps a little bit. I might try to go ahead and scoop this over. You always want to be pushing into the pegs or the stop if you can. And periodically, if you'll get little bits sort of caught like that, it'll start skating across the grain. Less of a problem with the scrub plane, but just flip it over and get those out. So the more you work down the grain, the longer your cuts are going to be. And as always, you want to try to act like you're, as it was either Roy Underhill or Chris Schwartz says, you want to try to act like you're scooping ice cream rather than doing the whole banana deal here. You want to act like the plain scooping ice cream and really get a nice long stroke out of that. That matters more in finer stuff, but it still applies here. Brace it with my knee a little bit. These edges sometimes be a bit of a bear. Move down on the other side. All right. See if we can do that. And just by virtue of this thing's own weight, it makes it a little easier to deal with. When I say that, try bracing it. Yeah, that end down there still has, it's got a little bit of craziness in it, but I mentioned it's a little bit of work to make these. I can tell, and I'm only taking, you can see sometimes I'll work in the middle or work on one end or the other. I can tell it's a little high over here. So another one of those chips, you can always feel them. See, that corner is rough and that corner is a little rough, but as long as I get this side good. This side's kind of low. Might not worry about that too much. We're almost ready for going to a the floor plane, which I might start now. Start with now. You know, I don't want this thing to get too long in the tooth, but so we've got the old Thistle brand wood-soled plane. Make sure we're still in focus. Yep, everything looks pretty good. Okay, so I guess roughly 12 minutes it took to do that. So it works fast, just a little bit of work. I don't know if I've got this set well enough. We'll see. I think we do. Yeah, we do. So it takes a second. You see it barely cuts anything at first, and then you start getting nice shavings. And as I've mentioned previously, this is the Anglo-American style plane that you would, especially back in the day in England, you wouldn't see people using a scrub plane. You'd probably see them using this instead because it's got a cambered edge, very similar to a scrub plane, just far less aggressive and wider. So this is my intermediate step plane generally. You can, the problem with using these diagonally, this one can get a loaded mouth. You get stuck and you have to keep a little thing to knock it out with, especially if you run it diagonal. But oh yeah. And this thing does have what they call a chip breaker in it. It's a second little thing in here, and it makes the iron more sturdy, but I don't really think it doesn't break chips. Just an old-timey marketing gimmick. Yep, see, I loaded the mouth there again. End here. I just have a bad habit of skewing this thing more than I probably should. That's how you want it to work. Beautiful. This one, it cuts. You're not putting as much force in a smaller space as with the iron on a scrub plane, so it tends to not wobble around as much. That's why when it was starting to wobble so much, and I'd already gotten it fairly flat, that's why I decided to go to this. And this is really helps having a nice long sole in these larger pieces. It can be a hindrance on really short stuff, but let me check it. Let's see how we're going. That's really about as flat. I'm not, you know, sometimes you have a tendency to push harder at the end of the stroke and you'll slant or slope the piece. But in this case, it's really not, it's really not a problem. Try to take the roughness out right there. A little lighter. I don't know how well it picks up, but you can see this does leave troughs too. It's not a smoothing plane that creates a flat surface. Or, well, a very flat surface. It's about good. That edge. Try to take some lighter passes. And move over down to this edge. Beautiful stuff. If you have ash in your area, you can get a hold of it. Use it while you can, because they're all being killed by the emerald ash borer, which is a downright shame. It is such a beautiful wood to work. I guess on the plus side, all the timber companies are cutting it. And you can get it cheaply now, so. Okay, all right. Yeah, that looks real nice. Let me give it one more check to make sure see how we're looking. I see one hump right in this edge that I might do a little bit. I might take a little more right out there. So, if you want to, if you kind of mark an area, give yourself a target. See, maybe just a little more. Okay, let's see what that looks like now. Oh yeah, I'd call her good. That's good enough for what I need. Perfect. So let's have a look. Well, I won't get a shadow. It's roughly what the surface looks like, and maybe you can see the troughs in it. You could take it down further than this, but there's really no need for this, in my opinion. Or this particular, yeah, you can really see the... And a lot of times I like this finish. It looks a little finer than the scrub plane, but you can still tell that it's handmade. There's a few little rough spots left, but... And as I say, I'll do something, I could even plane that down. Once you have the legs on it, you can kind of prop it over and then use a plane or a spoke shave to square up your edges. Oop. So, not the best camera work, but maybe that was acceptable. Now on to part 4, I guess it is. Boring the, well, I guess that would actually be part 5. Part 4 would be making the legs. Fortunately, I already have some that are dried. We'll take a look at fitting those and boring the holes, and that's the most laborious part. So coming up part 4, 5-ish.